You're tuning in to CraigCast, the best in Web3, blockchain, NFT, and cryptocurrency technology. Great reviews, incredible interviews with the leading people in Web3. I'm your host, Craig O. Join me on my live stream as we go across multiple platforms, talking to some of the best people in the space. I've done well over 100 episodes, full-length podcasts gone live on multiple channels. All that to be said, CraigCast helps my community to plot, plan, strategize, and implement their next moves. I describe myself as 25% DJ. The other 75% is really steadfast to make sure that I understand the long-term implications of this space. I want to bring information to you. We might not happen to the same NFT community, but we are all here, and the bigger bet is on crypto overall. How will blockchain affect a world that will be fully tokenized in the next 10 to 15 years? Where will quantum computing be? How will AI, as it's already been a disruptor, how will that impact us over the next 5 to 10 years? So everything that we do on this stream is long-term in mind. I'm your host, Craig O. Let's get to it. I'm joined by Mr. Stephen Miller, one of the most respected curators and cultural voices in emerging from tokenized art, the digital creative ecosystem. Steve is the creator behind the Patron Age, highly followed collector-focused digest, dedicated to generative art, digital art, and the discovery of artist showcases. And he gives a thoughtful analysis on the surrounding on-chain creative culture that is upon us. His work has become the go-to resource for collectors seeking to cut through all of that noise and gain a deeper understanding of the significance behind artists, collections, and the movements shaping this incredible, empowering meta. Wow, get those words out of my mouth tonight. Known as the tokenized art's leading non-financial advisor. Steve approaches this space from a fundamentally different angle. And I'm so grateful to have him here tonight. GM, Steve, how are you doing this evening?
GM Craigo, thank you so much for having me back, dude. It's been far too long. And honestly, man, I'm stoked to be able to sit here and talk art with you tonight. It's been quite the journey to this point for both of us. I know this show has been on air for well over 100 episodes now. I'm happy to say that I was there early on and I'm here now. So glad to be with you.
It's awesome to have you. You know, it's funny. I'll create this intro and I'm like, most nights I nail it. No problem. It's been a long day, but to spend the last few hours with you before I head to sleep, it's a true treat. And I was thinking to you coming on, I thought of two specific things. Color commentary, which is really focusing on your live stream that goes live every Tuesday. Correct me if I'm wrong, 2 p.m. EST.
Yep, that's correct.
And then we have the Patron Age, which is your newsletter. It's a free newsletter, and it really gives people a really good perspective or idea on the different collections to be launched. And do I have that correct?
Yeah, so the only thing that I'll correct you on there is it's the Patron Age. I always laugh whenever you say patron, but it's one of those things like you say tomato, I say potato, so I'm good with it.
Is it a Connecticut thing?
It may be a Connecticut thing, but East Coast, West Coast, we're all, united within and under crypto here. So I'm all good with it. But yeah, the Patron Age has been a ongoing publication I've done under different branding going back to August of 2023. So it's been quite a journey publishing that. But it is now under that banner of the Patron Age. And you can find that at thepatronage.art or on my profile.
Patron Age, we got that. There have probably been thousands of artists that you have featured in this newsletter. How do you make of who you're going to pick? Because I have to assume there are many more that don't make it onto there. How do you decide who's going to be on there? Is it a thing based upon speculation, or is it just your genuine eye and appreciation for it, both digital and generative art?
So, Craig, going back to when I started this thing out, one of the biggest weaknesses of the overall digital art space has always been discovery. And I have seen people attempt to solve it, and I've seen people fail at solving it. And I decided when I made this newsletter and I brought it into reality that I wanted it to be a source for art discovery. I didn't want it to be something where it was gated. I didn't want it to be something where if an emerging or brand new artist came to me and said, hey, would you mind publishing my work in here, that there would be some type of, oh, you have to meet this threshold, right? So for two plus years now, actually going on 3, which is still pretty wild to consider, that report has been very all-inclusive. I've done my very best to capture as much art across multiple chains as possible. I'm not kind of chain dependent. but I do in fact lean a lot Ethereum and Bitcoin, but I have in fact included art from Tezos, Solana, Flow blockchain, and I've even done a lot of physical coverage as well. So there's no shortage in that report.
So you just interviewed DK, who's probably one of the most notable artists out there. And I was looking and I said, Steve, do I have this correct? That's 4 ETH on his current launch. And I said, what makes something a particular price? And maybe I want to unpack a little bit with you, for those that are listening in, sort of the meta on, you buy a piece because you really like it, right? But you're spending thousands of dollars. So you want that to go up or appreciate, or even stay equal to the same, because you appreciate that artist and you want to support their work. How does someone, I guess, unpack that and get into understanding the mindset before they go on and go, well, I like that picture, I'll get that one, or I like that one? What's the first entry in for someone who's kind of new to this space?
So it's a really good question, Craig. When I think about emerging art, I approach it differently than I would with established artists. When you look at an artist like Daniel Keth, DK, he is somebody who has been in the scene for a very long time. He has garnered a lot of large collector support before, the likes of Blondie, Sam Spratt now, Batstu. Like, there's a lot of large name collectors out there that really do love his work. And so, yes, there is a part of that that is supply and demand, and what the past market that artist has commanded can command going forward, right? So what I was telling you about before the show, in Daniel's case, he has a collection that he's released and has scaled over time for the last year or so, that released initially at a 2 ETH price point for each piece in this collection. It's a small collection. I believe it's a total of 14 pieces. And the piece that you're referring to that was a 4 ETH price was the first and only piece in this collection that was put out to market that is visually seen and appreciated while being listed on the market. All these other pieces were bought for 2 ETH sight unseen. So there is a dynamic there that says, now that you can see the work, now you know what you're going to get, there is a benefit to that, but there was a lot of trust put behind the 2 ETH that props up the value of the underlying collection.
There's sort of an artistry to not only the creative process, because I want to talk about the difference between generative and digital art and kind of understand and explore that, right? Because to us on a screen, something could be moving around, but one is digital, one is generative. But before we get to that, I think what's interesting is there's almost an artistic expression from the artist on a marketing standpoint, right? Is that they've had this art that has gone out, the community's valued it, or that they said, you know, that this is what it's worth. Has there ever been an artist, before we get to generative and digital art, has there ever been an artist where they've had a massive collection of great first success on their launch, and then they come up to this anticipatory moment for their second launch and they fall short? Has there ever been a story of that you can think of that comes to mind?
So what I will say, generally speaking, is yes, of course, there are plenty of different artists, especially in the emerging category, and even some that what I would refer to as kind of like the scale of emerging, emergent, and established.
Yep.
When you look at that scale, oftentimes emerging artists don't stick that landing the second time around, right? It's not something that, you know, is just once you nail it once, you're on the road, right? You can come up short, but I can't sit here and name specific individuals in that case, because the last thing that I want to do is put somebody on notice for their own, you know, creative history. But that's not to say that they can't rebound. I think that's the biggest message that I can say right now, is from what I've seen and observed and also worked with other artists on, is that a rebound is very much so possible. So if you find that you're putting out a secondary collection, or your second collection or a follow-on collection, and it doesn't receive the same type of fanfare that the first did, there's always another one after that. Because guess what? Creating as an artist is what comes naturally. You do that, you continue doing that. It doesn't stop. So don't let one, you know, down drop affect your own future as an artist. Don't let it get in the way.
It's funny. I said that was the last question. We go to generative and digital, but maybe just peel that back just a little bit more. So an artist doesn't have the success on that first collection. Or second collection. I wasn't looking for you to give a name. What was maybe one or two things that artist, that someone who is a starting or collector or mid-tier collector can notice from strategy? Was there something that you noticed in their strategy that lacked? Was it timing? Was it price? Was it market conditions? What were a couple of the factors that maybe stuck out to you when they come back for their third collection? Because I agree. Look, just if I have an off night on my live stream, I'm okay with it because I've been doing it enough that I know that I'll have more good than I'll have bad. I'm okay with that as a content creator or a live streamer like yourself. So I guess just as we peel this onion back, was there something in the timing, the market conditions, or even their art was a complete deviation away from what they were doing before that they're like, I can't relate to that?
Yeah, so fortunately, I think that the deviation element is not the most common. When I look across the broader market and I look for what is the most common denominator between each of these releases that, if it is a secondary release or it's a follow-on release that falls flat, what is the cause? Most of the time, it ends up being oversupply compared to the prior collection, in addition to a difference or a significant difference in the way that it's priced. Pricing in this market, pricing in any market, frankly, with art is definitely something that's complicated. Okay. There is no, cookie cutter, easy way of being able to tell, but you do need to go out and talk to your collector base and get a better understanding of, okay, what will my base level collectors actually tolerate? What will they support? Right. If you're throwing that equation, that balance between the supply and your pricing completely out of whack, that is the most oftentimes the thing that is most going to get in the way of having a successful secondary release. That said, for me personally, I don't look a lot at the pricing dynamics these days because our market has been so turbulent for, geez, Craig, going back to like when you and I originally connected, excuse me,
Yeah.
those days, it wasn't a healthy market either. So when I think back to those days, I focus a lot more on story and what the work is actually trying to convey. And as a collector, that makes me a lot happier with the work that I collect long term, right? What actually resonates with me individually? What work really says something or that connects on a much deeper level that I can understand and appreciate long term? That's what I end up collecting most.
So we'll talk a little bit about deeper level because I agree with you. There's certain pieces that I see that really resonate, and we'll talk maybe a little bit about Snowfro. He's probably one of my favorite collections because we were talking about, you gave me this long list of artists. My gosh, I was going through it and I'm like, whoa. But before we get to that, right, you have generative and digital art. So to an untrained eye, how do we know what we're looking at?
So the easiest way that I can make sense of this for, let's just say, member of our audience right now is a newcomer to art, right? On-chain art. The biggest things that I want to ask up front is, okay, what is the medium? How is the work being created? And also, how is it being stored, right? Is it something that is going to be stored entirely on chain, or is it something that is not, right? It's going to be put in IPFS. Sometimes in what I personally think is the worst case scenario, it's stored on like Amazon cloud servers.
Oh,
but yeah, we can get into that all day long. I don't want to turn this into a rant, but what I look for is medium first and trying to understand, okay, is this something that's made with code? Is this something that an artist brought into Midjourney and was strictly using AI tooling to create? Or was it something that was fully illustrated by hand in Procreate, or was it painted, right? That's what I mean when I say medium. So I always look at that first to get a base level understanding of how it was created. That's just brass tacks, at least to me. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense as the medium, and then obviously how it was created, and then how it's stored. And again, we don't want it on Amazon. Can we agree? No Amazon cloud.
Yeah, look, so something that I do always like to disclaim to first-time collectors, people who are early into art on chain, is you need to get a better understanding for how permanent your work is. If the work is stored on a cloud server, it can go down. We've seen that a lot lately, right? There are certain services and platforms that have gone under recently, like Foundation, that are massive, and they stored a ton of artwork over the course of the last 4 or 5 years. And unfortunately, when they went down, not all that work was pinned. So a lot of the community had to come in and help pin that work to IPFS so that it could be saved at least in the medium term. I don't personally love collecting from IPFS. I like to know that my work is permanently stored on chain. That's why I lean personally as a collector, not as a patron, but strictly on the collecting side of things, toward what is the most on-chain artwork that I can purchase. That is work that tells a brilliant story, that connects on an emotional level, but has that permanence of being on chain long term, that protects the work. So for me, I don't have to then worry about server going offline and all of a sudden my work is gone, poof, right?
So IPFS, right? It's stored outside. It's not on chain, right? And that's sort of the debate on right centralization versus DeFi. True art that is on DeFi is. Can I assume that most generative art is DeFi, and that there's a lot of digital art that was used on Amazon Cloud IPFS? Would that be correct?
So Amazon Cloud Services and Amazon Web Services, consider that the farthest end of the spectrum away from being on chain. Let's just start
Got it.
there.
Yeah, totally.
As we walk back across that spectrum together, you start to get into stuff like IPFS, which is, yes, not stored on chain. It's using pointers to direct you to a link where that artwork is stored. IPFS being the interplanetary file server, file service, I believe is what they branch out to, is like the full name, priced. So you only have to pay, I think, 1 or 2 times on that to keep it alive on IPFS. It's protected, great. The specifics of how Arweave works, but Arweave is a bit more true on-chain, at least truer than IPFS is. Then you move into the world of truly on-chain artwork. With code-based artwork, art that is created using algorithms like generative artwork, that artwork is oftentimes really easily stored on chain because it is so small in terms of file size. When you start storing work on chain in the most authentic sense, it can be more expensive. That is absolutely a fact. It's true. But it comes with the benefit of being a lot harder, a lot more permanent long term. So for me, I like to collect work that's on chain, and a lot of that, it does end up being code-based artwork.
And that all of that is pretty much on art blocks, all generative art. Is that correct?
Yeah, so everything that you find over on art blocks is going to be generative artwork. I believe there are a couple of cases where they have built in some AI tooling at some level
Right.
for certain projects, but it's definitely, in the vast majority of it, is going to be code-based artwork that is fully on chain. They made a really big push for that back in 2024, I believe it was, when they moved all of their file dependencies fully on chain. So that was a very big move for them, but that's not to say that all generative art is art blocks. There are plenty of other platforms that have deployed generative artwork in the past that have done gallery releases that have been with specific generative artists. Heft Gallery comes to mind, Fellowship comes to mind, FX Hash. There's a lot that have done some incredible work with generative artists. So I don't mean to discount them, but I think if I'm taking a broad strokes approach, the vast majority of code-based art is on chain. So that to me is the big important thing there.
I love that. I love that. And all right, let's come back to the Patron Age and, reviewing the things that you're curating and sort of the enormous amount of work that you have to do every week. And I know that you have a process, and I'm sure that it changes how you personally define both the quality of generative and digital art. Let's expand a little bit on the Patron Age and what people can expect when they go into this newsletter and what they're gaining from that information.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to. So with the Patron Age, what I set out to do every single week with that is give people a true lay of the land across what is coming up over the next 30 days in and across digital art. So you'll find on the website, patronage.art, in any given edition, there's blocks of text. And in those blocks, it's typically color coded to be purple for Ethereum, orange for Bitcoin, white if it's a physical release, blue if it's Tezos or Solana. All of that's then kind of denoted throughout the newsletter itself. Same sort of thing goes over on X. So if you find the post that's pinned to my profile on X, you'll see it there too. And it has the little emoji blocks for orange for Bitcoin, purple for Ethereum, just like I was saying on the website. But visually, it's a little bit more appealing and easily organized on the website. So take that into account over there. It's a benefit for why you would want to sign up for free over on the Patron Age. But with what I'm putting out there is all the bare essential information for people. When is the release happening? Where is it happening? What does the pricing look like? What are the mechanics behind the release itself? Is there an allow list, right? Answering those questions and making sure people are on the same page is essential for art discovery. Then I do take it one step further. I've joked with you offline about it because who needs mental health? I will go through each of the releases that makes it into my digest, and I will write my own curatorial statements for each individual release to paint a picture for people about what each of these pieces bring to the table. If I don't have a written blurb for a piece in there, it's because that artist did not actually leave any of that context online, like during my research, that I could find. So if you see a curatorial statement written about the work, that's written by me firsthand. I always do that for the artist because I want to be able to amplify their work. If you're looking for just, okay, what do I need to look at any given week? I'm tired of all your bullshit, Steve. There's so much artwork here. What I like to encourage people to do is look at the thumbnail graphic that I generate every single week. I typically put 4 to 5 releases in that headline graphic. Those are the pieces that have really caught my eye as a curator, and I encourage people to go and spend a little bit more time with those individual works. So definitely that's kind of the cheat code that I don't advertise all the time.
You know what's funny? I always think, remember the word alpha, give me the alpha. And I think I like to call it insightful insight, versus this idea that somehow what you're saying is sort of the way. But there's a little cheat sheet, is that in that thumbnail, because I always see the thumbnail and I'm like, oh, this is interesting and it'll catch my attention. But if you're featuring those artists in that thumbnail, that's maybe where you want to draw on and pay attention. And I like how you have the hyperlink to their X page. So at least I can check them out. I can see what the comments are. It's not about how many likes. It's what's the engagement. If someone's really excited, then after I've gone on to the Patron Age, which again, I've really enjoyed it. I feel like I want to Patron. It's so funny. I know it's Patron. But I find myself then going to art blocks and looking there. Then I'll go into YouTube and I'll see if there's any videos that they've done, because I notice myself that I want to hear an artist that has a story that captivates me, because it's not enough whether you're going to spend 100 or 5,000. Matter of fact, you're going to probably correct me. Pasma. And I don't, it's Peter Pasma, right? Is that how I say it? Just Peter?
Yep.
Okay, good.
Look at you. You nailed the name for the first time in all the time we've been together.
I know. I'm just like, I totally flubbed on your intro, but I love you, brother. But I was thinking that I have these 2 pieces that you helped me to get. Why don't we talk a little bit about him? Because that to me was how that piece, when you put it up and long enough, how it will change, because it is generative art, is probably one of the things that really captivated me. And, I have it. It's in my cold wallet. I have 2 of his beautiful pieces. One of them is a little more rare than the other. So maybe I'm bringing you back probably 3 or 4 years now.
Oh yeah, no, and mind you, this is one of my favorite collections all time. So I'm more than happy to talk about it.
Talk a little bit about him.
The collection that you're referring to is Sculpture. Yeah. Yeah, so it's called Sculpture by Peter Pasma, but Peter has been an artist in the generative sense and like an algorithmic artist now. I believe it's going on 10 to 20, like somewhere between 10 and 20 years. So he's been doing it for a very long time at a very, very high level. But among the things that he's most well known for is his code efficiency. So what you see in any one of his artworks, most of the time is like in the ballpark of 2,500 to like 3,200 lines of code, which is extremely, extremely lean code for generative artworks. That's something that's just kind of important to have in the back of your head. But out of curiosity, before I take this any further, because as much as I can talk Peter Pasma, one of the things about art that I love the most, especially when talking about it on a stream like this, is the ability to show and tell. Is there any way I can bring up a screen share and be able to show a little bit of this work? It's so funny as you're saying that, because I'm going through it right now. And in the background, Sam, I have the Sculptor. I actually have it open. Sam, can we get that screen on the live stream? If you see it, can you pull it up in there? Let's see if we can get that up, because I agree with you. I was thinking about that tonight. It was a little departure, but I was looking at some of these pieces and I'm like, my God, when people see this, they're going to understand why I absolutely went nuts on this. Let's see if we can get this up here right now. Are we able to get that up, Sam? I see you in the background. Hold on 1 second, because I agree. It's a little bit of show and tell. Sam, give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Yes, there he is. You're good. Come on in. Oh, okay. Don't come in.
Let's see if we can get it up. Oh, he says, get your hand off the thing. Got it. All right. Let's see if we can get this up right now. Thank you, Sam.
Sam's always looking out.
Oh man, I need it. I'm so technically deficient. I need lines of code in my own life. Can you see that right there, Steve?
There we go. Yep. No, I see it perfectly. So what you're seeing here within Sculpture is still to date one of my favorite collections that ever came out through Art Blocks Curated. Great. And the reason that I'm very, very big on this is this collection did things that we had never seen on Art Blocks, I guess, prior to its release. It has like individual functions built into each piece to where each one is unique. It has unique form, but it will then continue to polish and render the piece in real time if you open it in browser. So click on any one of those pieces, it'll bring up live view, and you'll see it go from kind of a fuzzy state to something that is ultimately really polished after your browser runs it for, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. You see it get to be more defined from what is already extremely high fidelity artwork right out the gate. But that to me is a really interesting thing that he built into it. But the collection itself is, I believe, 1,000 pieces, and it explores generating form in three-dimensional space. That's the entire underlying premise. So each of these sculptures has been carved really from infinite possibility. That's the nature of generative artwork. It's each piece is created from a unique string of hash, so letters and numbers. That's what makes it entirely what's the term for it? Infinitely random, right? So that is really important underneath it all. But each of these shapes, and it's one of the coolest parts about this, is illuminated using unique lighting effects. So the light itself is something that he coded into it. So the unique positioning of where your light source is in that generated space is entirely determined by code. So to me, it's a really unique collection. It's something that I think a lot of people should, take some time to go through and appreciate. But altogether, it's 6,370 bytes. That's all it is. Whereas if you look at a lot of the artwork that's handmade that looks like this, you're talking about artwork that is probably in the gigabytes in terms of, the amount of file storage space it takes for just one of these pieces. So it's pretty incredible what code can do here.
It's funny. I'm lucky enough to have two of these pieces, which is pretty awesome. Because of our conversations. And you're like, Craig, you got to find what you love. First off, that is the most important. Second of all, is an artist with a story. And I know he just had a launch the other day, which was really cool. And it seemed like it was a very different departure from this type of medium of art with his latest collection that I think was put out on Art Blocks. Am I correct on that one?
Yeah, so his release the other day, which was released through Art Block Studio, that collection approached three-dimensional form just in a very different way. It kind of tracked a little bit more towards where this is like hyperrealism. It tracked more towards like the pointillism movement and trying to define three-dimensional shape and creating faces. So very different concepts, right? But I love a lot of his work, whether you're talking about on Art Blocks, on FX Hash, something that Tender Art had put out a while back. Right. There's a lot of work that he has out there, but I love his work.
Let's do this, Steve, if we can. I would like to, if we can come off of that screen share. Thank you, Sam. I appreciate it. I want to now dive into, if I can with you, I want to talk about color commentary, because one of the things that I really like is your interviewing style with your guests and following their story. It's like kind of one of it's becoming, and I know it sounds funny, I know it's a live stream, but it's sort of like I treat it like it's my listen to podcast when I'm in the car, because every artist has a story, and your talent as a host and as someone that really understands intimately the space is how you guide your guest into telling a story. You had, I'm forgetting her name. It was last week you had her on. I think it was last week. I probably listened to it on Sunday, but her story about being a mother, how she put out her art, the strategy with it, the messaging that she put into it. And I really love how you dive in with your artists. Are there kind of like for me, I have my top conversations or interviews. I think, if I had in my top 5 of friends that I have on and a meta that I love, you're in that top 5. Interviews that I like as well were the ones that were particularly where the guest coming on was a little bit tougher on me. I'm not going to retweet. I'm only going to be on for an hour. And I understood. Listen, I value everyone's time. So there's different reasons why certain things are more favorite. Are there any interviews, without, it's not about favoritism, but just interviews that stood out to you where it's like, hey, if you're to go back and watch color commentary, and by the way, Grok is like the most amazing part of the app on X, because I can literally find any episode that you've done just by asking it, and we'll pull it right up for me. I'll click on it and I go right in that way. It's very easy. I don't have to like scroll through your page. But are there interviews or interview that really stood out? And if so, why?
Yeah, so there are a number that I consider just to be favorite interviews of mine, but in full truth, the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks of interviews have really been special to me. And it's partly because we crossed a major threshold for the show. We officially clipped episode 100 back 2 weeks ago now. That was with Fer Caggiano. And we did an entire deep dive on her artistic journey and her story and the release that she had put out that specific week. It was an incredible opportunity to dive deep with an individual artist. It's not something I do on a regular basis on that show. Normally, I cover 2 to 3 releases every single week on that show. And we sit down with the artists, we dive into their story. And while it is partly human interest, it's a lot more about helping collectors connect the dots and understanding what it is about this specific work that can speak to their soul, right? I don't necessarily focus on the financial dynamics and what the pricing is and how much you have to do to go and get this work. No. It's all about why does this artwork speak to you? What is the story behind it, and who will it ultimately resonate with? That to me is the most important part of what I do on my show. But we do one-off interviews like that every now and again. So that interview is really special. We did another one-off today that we mentioned earlier on in the show. That was with my buddy Daniel Keff. And Daniel had an incredible story behind the work that he did for this collection called Blue Skies Forever. And it's rooted in a connection that he had with a man who is arguably the preeminent artist in all of digital art right now, which is Sam Spratt. Sam commissioned a work from him, and it actually led to this entire collection. That's really powerful shit. Like, just to say it plainly, like, that's really, really powerful.
Yeah. I remember that was one of the artists that we did talk about was Sam Spratt. And I remember when the meta was hot, I was trying to understand, right? From 2 reasons, 2 ways. One is, what's the art to collect that you really enjoy? And 2, if you're going to be spending this kind of money, you don't want number going down. I get it that again, when things are peaks and valleys, but I feel like long-term people, and we talked about these high definition TVs where someone's going to have and be like, hey, check out my artwork collection. Oh yeah, that's all fully on chain. It's not IPFS. So I love that. So that actually helps to explain to me in part why do you think that when Sam commissioned a piece of Daniel's art that helped his value and his art street cred to go through the roof? Was that definitely a help?
So I think it adds to the lore, and we've talked lore on your show before. Yeah. I think that adds to the lore behind the artist, but it's not the be all end all. I think that what it really did is when you have a figure like that, right? Like, let's just say, for example, let's say Michael Saylor comes to you next week and says, hey, I want to do a feature on your show. Right. It'll be 2.5 weeks out, and I want to be able to dive deep on Bitcoin, how it's the future of decentralized finance and all this, and how it's going to weave into centralized finance as well. Right. You're going to sit there as an interviewer, and you're going to say, I'm going to do the most research I've ever done to get into this and make sure that I really do treat this guest the right way. Right. That's going to build you up for that episode, and it's going to make you put out some of the best work that you've ever done, right? In the case of Sam and Daniel's relationship, what Sam commissioned Daniel to do pushed him so far outside of his comfort zone that it ended up resulting in some of the best work that he's ever done. And I don't say that lightly, because I love Daniel's work before this series comes out, right? He's a phenomenal composite photographer, but this pushed him so far outside of the comfort zone that it made for some of the most emotionally raw and what I kind of have characterized as like tearing, like an actual like claw into your skin approach to feeling artwork. That's uncommon. if you can walk away from an artwork and say that really did have that type of effect on me, that is artwork that not only you will likely stay convicted in for the long term, but it's artwork that will stay with you emotionally and like creating deeper memory to it. That to me is like, that's everything within art, is if you can have those experiences, regardless of the price, it's phenomenal, but it does build up for a lot more of, yes, opportunity for financial appreciation over time. Because if you feel that way, I'm willing to bet that somebody else does too. Right?
I'm going to go out on a limb here.
No one person's out there.
Am I correct to say that your mom was an artist?
Yeah. Yeah, she is.
Okay. And so one of the things that I was wondering is, again, I was listening, again, I told you I listen in the car, and I'll take these little mental notes, and I'm like, okay, what did I retain from this conversation? And your conversation with Fur, I was really impressed by her as a person. I gave her a follow. She ended up following me back and retweeting my comment. And I appreciate that, because I think the story of an artist is someone who really is sort of the idea of starving artist to a thriving artist. And she had mentioned that, but that's where your eye came from, because I was wondering, you get into this space, you're incredibly intelligent, so you're able to understand sort of the overall technicalities of the space, like when you're evaluating a piece. And I said, how do you determine or define generative from digital? And you said, well, I'm looking at a few different things. I'm looking at the medium, I'm looking at how it was created, and most importantly, I think, at least in my opinion, is how it's stored. Is it on chain or is it IPFS, right? So all of these things kind of come together. And then when we put up Peter Pasma, and you were able to say, look at this piece, look how it's evolving, how it's changing, the lines of code. Did the artist eye, was that always there because your mom was an artist? And if so, do you think that magnified for the work that you do today?
So it's a really good question. It's something that I haven't talked about recently at all. I don't get into my own origin story in the space much, but I didn't just kind of find myself in the arts. I come from a marketing and design background. I've been an entrepreneur for well over a decade, going back to 2015 now. And in that last walk of life, I was following a path where I really wanted to start a business with my father, because I watched him be an entrepreneur all through my youth. And I also watched my mother be an artist throughout, call it the back half. So 2011, 2012 onward. And as I entered this new chapter after about 4 or 5 years of running that company, I sat there and asked myself, I'm like, what do I really want to do? Like, what do I want to invest my time in? What matters in this next chapter? And it leaned a lot into creative. So for me, I then started kind of tracking, okay, what is it that I can do to make the most impact for artists? Because that is the other half of what made me, right? Is my mother. So when I look at what struggle she went through as an artist to kind of figuring out, okay, how do I get my art out there? How do I actually find my way to collectors? It's extremely hard in the traditional sense. It's not easy. There's a lot of work that goes into it. And I'm not saying that there isn't the same level of work that goes into it on the digital side, but I knew the digital side. I had already worked in crypto at that point for 2 or 3 years. Yeah. So in 2023, I made the decision that I'm going to put my efforts towards making positive impact in the lives of people like my mom, that want to have their stories told, that want to have that level of exposure. And so I started building a platform for them. That was the really important thing for me. So I've now been doing that, like I said, for going on 3 years, and I've never felt, more fulfilled in anything that I've done in my life. It feels like I'm in the right place. I'm doing the right things. And I constantly am told about, how positive that impact has been for the artists that have been featured, that have had those moments of being in the artist spotlight that I've created. And I don't do it for me, I do it for them. So as long as that is continuing to happen, it means that I'm meeting my goal, is I'm creating impact for them. So, and for the record, I do that nonprofit. I don't take a dime from these artists. That's the other really big thing that I think people wonder in the background, is like, well, how is he, making a living off this? It's not through them. I can tell you that for absolute sure.
You know what, though, as more people subscribe to the Patron Age, as more people go and listen to and watch your video content, you then find or attract the right types of sponsorships. And you and I have talked about that quite a bit offline, and how important that is, because there's a lot of crazy, maybe negative stuff in the space. And I just been keeping distance. But I appreciate you allowing me to ask sort of a vulnerable question, but I really wanted you to encapsulate the why. And you did, right? It all starts back with mom and the artist eye, and you have that. So let me go to here with you on this. When you study the history of generative art from pioneers like Vera Molnar, who you told me to take a look into, on platforms like Art Blocks, what do you think are the most what are the newer collectors misunderstood about the roots of this movement? So someone goes on Art Blocks, they see Peter, they're like, oh, that's really cool. But then they don't understand how it all started with Vera. And then maybe we'll talk a little bit about Snowfro, and then we'll work our way down into some of the other artists as well.
Yeah, so I think that one of the things that people miss the most often, and I only have context for it because I've become a student of it, is the historical side of it, right? It's hard to understand technologically, like why we are where we are today within art and digital art in particular, without looking back, right? There have been plenty of artists, not even generative, that have created artwork using computers going back to the 70s, right? Sorry, the 80s even. And though it was early artwork, the Keith Harings of the world, even Warhol, they experimented with digital. Even Michael Hofka, who I had on my show last week, he started out in digital art back in the 90s, like right off of getting his first Mac computer. But he had been doing figurative artwork, figurative expressionist work for decades at that point. So it isn't that it's all that different, but understanding what it took to get to here and where we are now in art history, I think enriches the experience of appreciating the artwork that is sitting before you in this moment. So for me, I kind of geek out on that shit. I like to go back and look at Vera's work. I like to understand what it is that, went into it back then, but also the deficit that she experienced in those times. Because tokenization didn't happen back then. It happened in recent memory. It happened in 2017, right? So she never had the opportunity to just simply tokenize her work and sell it online until eventually she released Themes and Variations with Martin Grasser, right? That was a big deal. It was a really big deal because you see a legend who had ultimately sold digital artwork both in print form, and I believe it was also stored on things like individual hard drives at the time. That was the only way she could sell that work, which is nuts.
So her artwork is available in digital form because someone brought it on chain for her. Is that correct?
Yeah, so in the case of Themes and Variations, which she made with Martin Grasser, that was released in 2023 or 22. That release occurred, number one, just before Vera passed, which is insane history in its own right, but that is fully on chain. The rest of her catalog raison of work is not necessarily stored on chain. I imagine her estate may well do that at some point. We've seen a couple of other artists do that over time. But it's important to understand that when she created some of that digital artwork and the generative work that she originated back in the 80s, and I think it was the 70s as well, but I could be mistaken. When she was originating that work, it wasn't going to be something easily stored. She was going to have to get it into institutions. They were going to have to preserve it for her. So like some of that is on drives, some of that's in print form because she like taught computers how to plot the work, right? That's where plotter printing kind of sees some of its early origin. There's a lot to it, Craig.
No, I love it, and I love how we're unpacking this, and it's turning out to just be such a great conversation. Which again, between two friends, why wouldn't it be? Vera often introduced these small imperfections into her structured systems to create emotional tension, and I thought that was really kind of interesting. Is just as you see the visual art, the words, the way someone talks, everything is art, and I feel through that it's someone's buying that or access to that. Maybe can you expand on that? Because like you're a writer, and you have to be a writer to talk about art. Are there sometimes where you're looking, you'll be like, oh, this is a bunch of BS that I'm on my page, or this actually really resonates and connects with me? How do you delineate between those two? Is the BS writing and then the writing that really speaks to the piece and to the people who are possibly purchasing it?
Yes, I mean I hate to say this, but with the writing, oftentimes you have to go on gut and you have to trust feeling. If
Right.
you're reading it and you're like, I don't believe this shit, you probably got a pretty good gauge for it. I mean, that's where I'm at with a lot of what I read these days. But oftentimes you start to kind of sit there with it and realize what is authentic comes through because most of the time, not a lot of artists are writers. And that is a very strange thing to observe, but it is
Yeah.
very real. If all of a sudden it sounds hyper technical and it's really, really verbose, it's probably an artist using AI, and that sucks
Right.
because
Right.
you want to connect with the work more than anything. But we've seen a lot of artists that unfortunately are willing to compromise integrity to do that stuff, and also it then bleeds into their work. It's cutting corners. So you start to get a better feel for it, and it's something that takes time. Look, I would be sitting here lying to you to say that I haven't been taken advantage of in that sense. There have absolutely been releases where I thought it was something that it was really groundbreaking, and it turns out, guess what? It was not, or it was very much so something that was ripped off, or it was an emotional kind of um, parasite of sorts.
Friend, like a
I'm
friend
not gonna
lying,
call them out.
like a friend lying to you, or
Yeah,
infidelity of some sort, is that there's this
yeah.
cheating element, and you felt like, wow, how did I, Mr. Stephen Miller, get fooled by such artists? Well, you're so encapsulated into this space that you look like I for the good in people, and
Mhm.
oftentimes, it's tough. So again, it's those art. Let me ask you, the artists that are on art blocks, there is obviously a system that you have to have a level of skill to even be featured on there. Talk to
Mhm.
me, and I say that's the main base. I know you've got Gammon, you've got other places to collect, and maybe I'm focusing because next I want to talk a little bit about Snowfro, Eric,
Mhm.
and I want to learn a little bit about him, sort of a little on his backstory. But like when you go on there, a lot of these artists have been vetted and verified. Talk to me a little bit about what you think that process entails, and I think you might know more specifically, and if there's something that's lacking there, what should be included in that verification process as it concerns an artist and their work, dare I say, artist and work.
Yeah. So one of the things that I think needs to be said there is actually something that extends well beyond art blocks. Any one of these galleries that you've heard of or that will eventually come onto your radar, they operate very strictly using curatorial boards, and they oftentimes will have a curator on staff who like their entire role is to make sure that the people that are coming in and are being represented by their studio or by their gallery is meeting thresholds and they're meeting standards. If you're an artist that's on art blocks, I would say 9.9 times out of 10, you have been vetted heavily, right? They, for the longest time, utilized a true curatorial board model where I think they had 10 individuals that would review every single artist application before they were ever approved. And they did that partially for it to be a democratic process. But the other side of it was that they just got so hot so fast that they needed filters. They needed to figure out, okay, how can we ensure that the right people are making it on platform here? And you look across the spectrum, and like that is the case for things like super rare, right? Super rare artists, whether they're doing generative work, AI artwork, illustrative work, you have to pass an application process to get onto their platform and to be able to release artwork there. So the curation element of it is oftentimes really underappreciated, but it should be way, way more appreciated than it currently is, because it helps collectors understand, not only why somebody is releasing artwork on this platform, but what makes that work stand on that like next level, right? So for me, I look at art blocks as kind of the gold standard because they've put so much time, energy, and effort into curating the artists that get to release on art blocks. Yes, some people out there will criticize that and they should think it should be open. Guess what? Go start a platform of your own. You can do it. Like
Right.
if Eric and his team can do what they did with art blocks back in 2017 or 2018, whenever it initially started up, I'm
Yes,
lying.
sir.
It was 2019 or 2020. Don't know why I said 2017. That was when CryptoPunks came out. What am I doing, Craig?
Well, he bought this his story about how he got the CryptoPunks and how he was able to pick his traits, and he got the aliens and he got a bunch of them. And he was saying, well, there was sort of an idea that was birthed from that process that he kind of instilled a little bit into art blocks. But let maybe we can. I'd like to transition a little bit into Eric Calderon, aka Snowfro, who started art blocks. He was kind of laughed at. He was kind of mocked, like, this is crazy. Who's going to buy this art, on chain that's none at least is generative, and how do they even delineate? And we talked a little bit about that before. When you looked at and you saw art blocks launch, right? And I think about Chromie Squiggles and his other collection where I kind of think it's like the Speedway sign. It's got the arrows. What's the name of that collection?
Goodness.
You know the one I'm talking about. You can see it, right?
Yeah, no, I see it in my head, but I'm still a little bit too obsessed with his most recent collection, Lift. So I just constantly think of Lift and Chromie Squiggles.
Love it
when I think of Eric's work. But that collection that you're referring to was an embroidered collection that he released. God, I believe it was with Bright Moments, or no, it was with the Red Bull Racing Team, and that was back in 2023. It was a really, really cool collection and concept. I do recall that much. But when I think about Eric and I think about the journey that he's had from being an early CryptoPunks collector who got the opportunity to mint a bunch of zombies that ultimately ended up being the nest egg, not only for his family, but for what he then built into art blocks, is nothing short of kind of the fever dream that any one person now has coming into Web3. They want to be able to find something early that can, give them that type of financial freedom. And then in his case, that's what happened. He did have that big windfall that gave him the ability to do what he wanted to do. And in creating art blocks, it wasn't overnight success as much as people like to think in time frames here, right? We have a recency bias in Web3. It's one of our biggest weaknesses individually. But in his case, he and his brother, Daniel Calderon Arenas, and Jeff Davis, who's a longtime generative artist and arguably one of the greatest color theorists of our generation, and like seriously, he's written some of the most incredible books on color studies that I've ever read. But these three men came together and released the first three collections on art blocks, and it was all a test. It was all just a matter of like, I wonder what'll work, or if this will actually land. And none of those collections minted out overnight the way that we see collections mint out overnight today, because it was brand new. It was something that was totally new. And in the case of Chromie Squiggles, I believe that it stayed open and minted up until about 7,000 pieces, if I'm not mistaken, over the course of like a month or two, or like it was a full month. And he eventually stopped it at like whatever that 7,000, 8,000 figure was, and just chose how he wanted to distribute the remaining pieces up to piece number 10,000 or piece 9999.
Crazy.
Which is part of their lore. It's insane. I still remember being a part of the art blocks community early on when they were doing, Craig, this was so fucking cool. And I'm sorry to swear on a family friendly show, but it was so cool. It kind of is. I mean, there's kids that stay up late to watch this, I'm sure.
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
But they would do these weekly streams of their own. And on these streams, they would do like a weird quiz for the people that were watching. And you would go into this board, like what was it called? It was like a type form or a Google form to fill out the answers to this quiz. You had a limited amount of time, and whoever got 100% on that quiz or the highest score on that quiz in the time allotted would then just be gifted a squiggle. They did this like every week for a really long time, and it was so authentic.
And those squiggles
so cool.
right now are 4 ETH. By the way, it's AIO. It looks like that's the name of the collection is AIO. I think I had that right.
No, so AOI was the one that released it. It's gonna drive me nuts.
I'm looking at it right now, and I can't see. It just says Eric Calderon Snowfro, 10,000 unique artworks released on October 11th, 2023. And these are very affordable. I mean, like if you bet on an artist, especially the one that launched art blocks, this pretty bullish, still use that word bullish. But again, let me throw this one at you. You've collected a lot of art, and I always say, people move very humbly. I was listening to some of the people talk about their Tyler Hobbs story, how they purchased or minted a bunch of them at random, and they didn't understand what they had, and then they sold it, and they were like, oh my gosh, what did I just sell? I made money, but I could have made so much more. Talk about FOMO and the instant regret. Fear of missing out, but yet you got it, you released it, but released it too soon. When you think about your personal art collection, are there a couple pieces, and not based on number, that come to mind first? For me, it's obviously I have a much smaller collection. I'm rebuilding again. But for me, it's Peter Pasma, and those two pieces were left untouched because they remained in my cold wallet. I was very fortunate for that. But for you, as someone who is a collector, a storyteller, someone who genuinely and authentically supports the communities in which he gives a sort of, a canvas on his color commentary to artists to come on and share their experience, what are the pieces that are most notable in your collection that you're so proud of?
So I will fully admit, like, I have a very soft spot for Snowfro's work. So whenever I've had the opportunity to collect his work, it's been something that I've locked away and just saved for myself and for my kid. Like, it's never going to leave my collection. It's going to stay there forever, because he was one of the two people. I told the story about my mother earlier, but Eric was the other person that kind of lit the spark for me and really set me on this path to doing what I'm doing now. And that goes back to the very first Art Blocks weekend. So to me, if I own work by Eric, it's not leaving my wallet. That's just kind of one of the most bare bones things that I could tell you. But beyond that, yes, my sculptures by Peter Pasma, there's one specific piece in my collection of his that I will not let go of ever. It's something that I uniquely found within the broader 1,000 work collection that I thought was really unique, and it had a visual effect that I don't think is replicated anywhere else in the collection. So I hold on to that one very, very tightly. And I think the other piece, there's two other pieces. The one that's most recent is Pixel Decks by Kim Assendorf. I think that Kim has not only some really incredible community support, but he has one of the most unique approaches to pixel sorting algorithms that is out there. Like, he manages to compose individual pixels to dance in ways that they shouldn't. They just shouldn't be able to. And he manages to write algorithms that can conduct that orchestra of light and color in ways that just moves me. So to me, Pixel Decks is one that I will not be getting rid of anytime soon. And the last one, it could be generally stated because it's happened a couple of times, but I will call one of them out. Anytime that I've had a guest come on my show, and it's rare, just for the record, it's not something that happens often, where they've appreciated what I've done for them and sharing my platform with them, and they've decided to give me a piece of their work. Not anything crazy, right? Just like an edition or something like that is something that means like the world to me. And one of those guests was, the earliest example of it was Ryan Coatmans. And he's one of the most incredible photographers that we have out there. In his series, The Wild Within, is some of the most striking artwork that you will ever see if you go and spend some time with it. He gifted me one of his meme cards, and that meant the world to me. So that piece is sitting in my wallet and will stay vaulted until the blockchain no longer exists.
Yeah, I always say be careful of those words, right? Because again, you save it for you and your kid, and there's a balance, because art expression and artists that tell a story, along with you in color commentary and the Patron Age, you give people the ability to amplify their message and their story. So keep in mind that the lights stay on because, in part, you do such great work with an artist's eye. And thank you for allowing me to dive in a little bit on that why factor as to the reason of what got you here, in part, and how proud your family must be and all the work that you're doing. And I think it's a great story, just in short, that when an artist comes on and they really appreciate you, it's sort of a way of leaving a respectable tip. But more importantly, they've left their heartbeat or a little piece of their soul with you. And I think that's really the true value of that. Steve, I mean, look, I could talk for hours. I think we've covered, a handful of artists. We've talked about your early days and that art eye, and that's probably what caught my attention. The artist gives a part of their self to the expression, but they also need to put food on their table. They also want to create an amazing life for themselves. And I assume that some want to just paint in front of a mountainside, in digital rendering, and they can do that because they have the freedom to move about. Steve, is there anything tonight's conversation that maybe you would like to cover before we come to a close on this hour? Because it's been such a gift just having you here tonight. And I think once we got warmed up and back into it, I think I took away a lot of notes, not a lot, a little bit, a lot of notes that I'm actually going to be able to share with the community and a follow-up from our conversation this evening.
So there is one thing, Craig, and I'm going to lean in or zig where you zag for 2 seconds here. You and I have known each other a good long while now, and a lot of our conversations have centered around art and where the meta moves to and where it may be headed next. And I struggle with going on mic and being interviewed because I'm an interviewer. It's something we've already discussed. I do this every single Tuesday, much like you do. But I actually want to turn that table on you for a second, because there's a lot that can be said from different approaches and different experience levels in the space. And I'm curious if you as a collector have any advice for somebody who may be just breaking into the arts for the first time, or trying to, identify an artist or artwork that really speaks to them. What advice would you give to somebody that is trying to get their bearings in digital art, based on your own experience, not based off of what your buddy Steve has kind of coached you through over time? What would you say is the right place to start?
You're gonna hate me for this, but I would say that, before I knew you, I would probably go on an OpenSea and I would look at the art there, and I would say what caught my attention. Because I know you, because you have a great weekly show on Tuesdays at 2 p.m. EST, color commentary. And I said that if I want to understand an artist and their story, and if I connect with that, now I want to actually look at their art. And through that, I want to find out where they are. And if they're on art blocks, I'm going to go look there. If they're on another platform, you're going to talk about that in your Patron Age. So I want to go and look in there as well. So for me, probably the biggest thing is to follow you. And I know it's sort of, you say it's counterintuitive, but there are only a few people in the space that do what you do and command the level of respect with the absolute level, the highest levels of humility, that why would it be that I wouldn't say that they should be looking and talking and connecting with you and the stuff that you're putting out. And you gave a piece of alpha insight. I like to say it's just insight, which is go look at the thumbnail that I do each and every week to understand the artists that have caught my eye, and then go from there. Click on the links, go look at their X pages, go see what the comments are. So maybe that's on my end. I think for me, when you pointed out certain artists like Peter, I was like, wow, when you showed me how that art came to be and how that generative process, and when you speak so intimately to the level or the lines of code, I'm just like, oh shit, this is so cool. So that's on my end. That's kind of where I would say is that there are not many that do it in this space like you do, and you command the space respect of everyone. So therefore, it's you, Steve. That's how you're my gateway drug for art.
I appreciate that, Craig. And as much as I was certainly not trying to tee that up in my direction, it is appreciated because I know it's an authentic response from you. I think that there was a piece of advice that I gave you way early on, and I know you took it to heart for a little while at the very least, because you did interview a handful of artists in that time frame. And it was really to reach out and try to open up a dialogue with the artists that are catching your eye. That to me is one of the most underserved pieces of advice and alpha and insight that I could give you tonight. Because right now where we're at within the broader scope of this space's evolution is we're at a crossroads where attention is low and there are not a lot of newcomers that are coming in this exact moment. It's moments like these where attention is very much so elsewhere. And I don't mean that in a negative sense, but when you see that being the case, take those opportunities to go and have conversations with the artist, because that's when you're going to be able to break through the noise and actually forge those relationships. So
it's
that would be
interesting.
that would be the one piece of advice that I would give in this moment. But I appreciate where you're at.
Thank you, man. Facts are facts. We right now we have 49 live listeners. Here's the interesting thing about that. People will go back and listen, but there's probably out of that 49, I'm going to guess there are five that consistently listen to this conversation because they understand who and what you are. Those are the people that get the edge because they're trying to catch the wave of the meta, right? No focus on art and things. If there was ever a time or an opportunity to buy is when the attention economy is not focused on one part of decentralized finance. When it was the meme meta, you're swinging from one meme coin to the next, trying to grab money as you're losing money. Money's falling out your bag. Nobody will ever nail it perfectly. The one thing that I love as an art collector and as I continue to build my collection, we talked about this offline, is one of these little cubbies is for color commentary. Why? Because you're doing something that is so incredibly honest, something that deals with a group of people who are incredibly creative, who see the world through their lens. You can't get more honest on that. And to my 4 words, on CraigCast, we plot, we plan, we strategize, and we implement our next moves. And that to me is what you, color commentary, and the Patron Age, along with going into art blocks, represents in my life in the Web3 digital realm. So I appreciate you for being on this evening. And if there are any parting words that you have, Mr. Miller, please let the audience know.
Yeah, I'm going to give my parting words as, call it, a little bit of additional signal tonight. When you think about where the meta is headed, and when you think about, how you can be ahead of trend, I'm not making this suggestion based on the fact that I believe in digital art long term. I do. But if you want to know where things are headed and how things are cyclical, I would look back at the history books on how things like NBA Top Shot catalyzed the original NFT kind of swell. What we're seeing right now, and also how that swell led into digital art, by the way, just quick spoiler alert on that. When you think about how that will inevitably play out again, I would look no further than RWAs right now. And I know you're probably sitting here saying to yourself, what the fuck is happening? I thought we were just talking with the art guy. Why is he talking broader strokes crypto to us? Well, I've worked in this space since 2021. I know it inside and out, regardless of whether I'm talking digital art or not. And when I look at what's happened within digital collectibles and the RWA space, namely within trading cards, it is mirroring to a T what Top Shot did. It is bringing unique interest back in. It's creating new wealth. And what happens with new wealth? They want to find ways to redistribute said wealth so they're not exclusively allocated to one vertical. So I personally think that we're on the precipice of seeing some of that wealth trickle into NFTs. We started to see it earlier on this week. It is going to happen, I believe, in a much stronger wave here over the course of the next couple of weeks. But a lot of the signs are there. I would not be surprised if we start seeing some of that money start flowing into things like digital art and getting allocated in that direction. So maybe now is the time to challenge what you are bringing to the table and how you are going to approach the digital art market and how you're going to get the right information and source the right signal in this moment. That's kind of my last little call for you this evening, is consider where your signal is coming from and be ready for the next leg of the wave, because it is coming.
By the way, I did have on Andrea Maelli from BZ.io, and they are an RWA company. They work with Brinks to Vault. Their collectibles, very focused on Pokemon and a whole bunch of other collectibles. And that was a great conversation I had probably some 3 months back. On CraigCast, we plot, we plan, we strategize, and implement our next moves in Web3. The art, digital, generative art meta is not dead by any means. If you're not following Steve Miller, you need to follow the Patron Age, as well as his weekly live stream on X color commentary at 2 p.m. EST on Tuesdays. I will see you guys soon. Thanks so much for tuning in to CraigCast.
Thanks for having me, Craig.